But once we roll,
that's our conversation.
That's what we're talking about.
What's up, guys? It's Ricky, and on this particular episode, we are here talking to another brother in the faith, a podcaster of note, Mr. Blaque himself.
Hey, what's up, brother?
Leadership. It's all good, man. Nice to have you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. So, I think I knew you. You probably didn't know me.
Yeah.
When you guys were at, when you visited, I don't know if we were at the same conference or if it was what.
Sure.
Were you at Berkeley full time?
No, I wasn't. It was a very short stint. So I was probably total of like maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
Because I was just looking for like a home church at that point.
Oh,
and most of the guys there were close friends, you know, and so I think similar to you, I was still trying to figure out like
ministry work and what.
Yeah. Where am I supposed to be? You know, I was questioning a lot of stuff I was believing at that point. And so those guys were really helpful, man, in just helping me, you know,
finding your ground. Yeah. No. That's awesome. So
that's when we crossed paths.
Yeah, that's where I probably saw you in some of the sessions. So when I initially saw your podcast,
yeah,
I think it was, and it was not even a big topic. It's
Sure.
not like it's a viral video or anything like that. You guys were talking about your marriage and stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
If I don't know him, I probably know his wife.
Sure.
Someone I have to know someone there, and so that was the first thing that made me watch your videos. And also YouTube has a new algorithm that's kind of pushing a lot of newer channels and stuff like that and stuff.
Yes.
So I was like, no, I probably know them. Them. So as I mentioned, guys, Blaque has a channel which you call it.
So the channel is called The Dream Space, but the podcast is called That Husband Podcast. Yeah.
And it's a bit of your journey, or seeing the journey or the importance of that idea of males in this relationship and this dynamic that you have to deal with. And because you've had a lot of conversations with different guys and stuff like that, and it's just kind of like interesting hearing.
Sure.
Like I heard, what's his name?
Hongani.
What's it?
Hongani.
Hongani.
Yeah.
And when he was talking about his experiences, and you're like, I relate to that. I can pick that up.
Sure.
You know, and so you have this platform where you talk about not just your conversations with your thingy. I remember this other day you were like, I'm gonna or something like that, you know, which some people lose.
Sure.
By the way, you know, some people they become the head of the wife, and they lose that aspect of friendship.
Yeah.
So what is it that you felt like this platform has a place online?
Yeah, no, definitely, man. So I think I had another podcast before this one called 2.5 Husbands, and so the idea there, So how we initially started that, there was 3 of us, and then 2 of us were married, and one of our friends were engaged.
Yeah,
and so the podcast started because, you know, he was a husband to be. Yeah, we don't have a lot of older guys. You know, so we had, and I mean, we have the blessing in our own church community of older men. Yeah, but then we thought, how many other guys are out there who don't have that? You know, how many other guys want to get married, and yet they don't have voices of older men speaking into them who've walked the journey of marriage, you know? Or some guys don't want to get married at all because they just don't have good examples. And they're afraid of getting married because they're like, see, the only marriages I've seen, it's stuff on mainstream media, celebrities divorcing every chance they get. And so we're like, hey man, let's be an alternative voice. So it started off of that. But at a subjective level, my dad left when I was 15, but he was there from the time I was born, you know. And he was my hero in every aspect, you know. So just him teaching me how the world is, him instilling values and principles for the importance of education, how he loved my mom in front of us very visibly, he never hid any of that, how he was such a community leader, he took us to church, so just concerned about like our well-being as a family.
As a whole, from a physical, spiritual perspective wise.
And growing up where I grew up, Tembisa, same typical story in most black communities. Fathers are not there. I was the only kid growing up with a bunch of other kids around me, and I was the only one with a dad, Wow. So like lit from my family, like all my cousins, I didn't know their fathers. If I knew their fathers, it was because he would come visit, but they never lived with their fathers, I was the only one growing up with my dad, and so I've always wanted to be married because of that, and then when he left, I was like, more reason to get married, man.
That example that stuck out.
More reason. I don't want my family narrative to kind of repeat the same thing, So let's actually pursue marriage. And then when I became a Christian, that obviously trumped everything. So that's why I started the channel, or rather the podcast, and that's why I continued with it now. So those are really my motivating reasons why.
So because it does. It's like you've just it's like you've carved your own pocket. And that's what makes. There's so many things that could help in safety when a person wants to protect their hands, but then there are specific gloves that are made for specific tasks, for handling chemicals like this, if you're going to be handling concrete and whatnot and stuff like that. So your podcast just fits, it just feels like a glove. I'm like, the other day I was like, I need to recommend some people I know to do this. So it fits so perfectly. That's another thing that people just sometimes don't think about. What makes great channels? It's those ideas that are very strong ideas. Applause on that.
Thanks, man.
A good idea is a good idea.
Thanks, man.
But now there's this part that you sometimes put in, which is your conversations with your wife. How long you guys been married?
So we've been married 10 years now. 10 years in March.
Would you say you got married young?
I did.
So perfectly fit for this conversation.
My wife would say she was probably younger, just maturity wise, sense of being ready, I mean, we're just a year apart, but we were in our early 20s when we got married.
Wow. Did you have a blast of a wedding, or you guys just went to sign, or?
Bro, I am yet to find somebody who probably had a cheaper wedding than mine. I dare anyone to say, listen, they might be out there.
Trust me.
They might be out there, but like in terms of budget, it was very cheap. In terms of the size of the wedding, we had invited 65 people, and bear in mind we're both black, so.
For those that don't understand,
we both black.
If you give a wedding card to one person, the whole neighborhood.
Hundreds. But there's, and maybe reasons we'll get into why it was so small. But 65 people, I think 61 came. The other 4 had other commitments, and then I think overall, like our wedding was less than 12,000.
Wow. Okay, now I think there are cheaper weddings. And were you working by the time when you guys got married?
I just quit my job, and we only dated for I think a year and like a month. And the reason why we dated for that long was because I didn't have a job.
You probably would have been married earlier.
Yes, we would have been married earlier. So I was like, sure, whatever. The wife can bring in more money, but I believe the husband needs to work.
The husband needs to work.
Yeah. At some level, just work. You know, even if you're bringing in like 200 bucks. Yes. Just work, right? And so we both have that conviction, and so we're like, hey, let's not get married until I get
you are able to do that.
And so I was also transitioning between, because I studied film, so I was working, you know, in television, did some stuff there. But I just wasn't, my spirit wasn't settled, man. And I was like, I'm going to leave this. And I had started doing music as well full time at that point.
Yeah.
So then, you know, had the calling to be in ministry, and then had asked my church community if they believe that I should be. You know, and so we're just planning that year for me to actually transition into ministry.
So basically, you stepped into your marriage.
Yeah.
And in ministry, so you stepped into two ministries at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what it becomes.
Yeah,
it's God's wisdom. Using God's wisdom to navigate your own times of difficulties.
Sure.
And then there are times of difficulties in order for you guys to come to a decision. Basically, everything just becomes that.
Sure.
So you enter two ministries at the same time.
Yeah. Probably not the wisest thing, but here we are. And it was. I mean, I think it was more of a shock for my wife.
Marriage.
Yeah. So my wife had never lived outside of home, ever. So even in varsity, she still lived at home. So this was the first time she's gonna live outside of her mother's house, you know. And I think I believe I have a sense of, I think it's a gift, you know, of just not caring much about stuff, right? I think it's a divine gift where God is just like, He's blessed me with a sense of being calm. Yeah. Like I'm not fazed by a lot of things.
But were you in? Did you go to? I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Did you go to boarding school?
No, I wasn't. I've always,
because I think I can identify exactly with where your wife is, which is something that I've said about myself, is that I feel like I make very slow decisions.
Sure.
I make decisions very slow because I feel like I've always had the cushion.
Sure.
Of I either had my mom or had someone. Yes. You know, my sisters, they got married. My younger sisters, by the way, they got married. One has been married for almost 6 years now.
Sure.
And I guess when I look back at them and I'm like, they moved out. They went to schooling somewhere else, not with my mom.
Sure.
So me, when I left primary, straight to living with my mom.
Sure.
And so I'm guessing they were in that position where they could make decisions. So I'm guessing that's where.
Yes.
So she had a shock of.
No, she had a shock, man. Yeah. And I think another thing is with marriage, and you know, we speak about this in the podcast quite a lot. Just the importance of marriage prep, but the greater importance of post-wedding counseling, right? So I think a lot of us focus our energy on marriage prep.
Okay.
To prepare for, which is good, but
by marriage prep you mean?
Yeah, so meeting with somebody and you're talking about, you know, the importance of money, what you guys think of sex, how you gonna treat the in-laws, you know, what do you think of kids? Do you both want to have kids? You know, so I know other people do that for like 8 weeks, other people do it 13 weeks, and once while we're on the subject, but I think people who pay or charge for marriage prep, like I think it's dodge, man. Like I'm like,
not happening.
Nah, bro. I'm like, come on, like, you know, this couple is going to get married, and they probably in debt already, right? Because most couples are, because family pressure, etc. Maybe their own uncontrolled desires of wanting to have my perfect wedding, and they overspending. So I'm like, don't charge them now for advice, right?
They need the advice.
So, and I think the advice is good to say, do we still want to get married now? I don't think it actually prepares you for marriage. Marriage is one of those on-the-job lessons, on the job, you know. That's
you learn it when you're there.
When you're in it. So we can speculate before, okay, this is what our fighting style is. this is how you think about finances. But it's in the moment when you're looking at your credit card, SARS is on your back, the bank wants then it's like, what does this person actually think about money? You know, how do they actually value and see money? Because you can say all the nice things while we're having marriage prep, but it's sure. Yeah, we have to give to the Lord. Yeah. Sure. Now we're in here and we haven't given in 3 months.
You gave to the church $300. That's an argument.
Yeah. We don't have petrol here. But marriage prep, you said you love Jesus. Like what is going on now? Right? Yeah. So I think marriage prep is good for making the decision of whether you still want to get married at that point. And once you say yes, I think the more important thing is post-wedding counseling. So now that we're married, can we go meet with somebody and say, okay, we did have the fight, and this is how she spoke to me. Well, this is what he did. Okay, now let's compare notes. Okay. How you guys going to go back into your house and do this marriage thing now? Okay. You know? Okay. Because at least then you have data. And so I think we didn't realize the importance of post-wedding. Yeah. So everything is coming at my wife, you know. We didn't even speak about like cooking, something as simple as that, you know. So she comes in and she's like, well, I'm the woman, I need to cook. I'm like, I didn't ask you to cook. I didn't, you know, I grew up with my mother comes back home and she's like asking us, what are we eating? What do you that's the house I grew up in, you know. And then we decide on the spot with my mom, this is what we're eating. Or she's tired, she doesn't, you know. Yeah. And I eat once a day. That's me, you know. If I eat in the morning, I'll be flat. So I don't even have breakfast. I just have coffee throughout the day, especially if I'm working. I can't. If I eat, the itis gets me. I'm done. Yeah. So I'll eat at night. But even then, I'll eat whatever. I'm not fussy, you know. So if we eat umuputu, that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, if you want to say, no, I'm making porridge, let's eat umtogo. I'm fine. Whatever is there, I'll eat. No, I'm tired, let's eat bread. But we didn't speak about that. So she comes in with, I need to cook. And she hates cooking. So now, for like the first 6 months, this woman is miserable. And she's just struggling. And it's only when we speak and we have this conversation.
You actually want to cook, bro.
Yeah, and then that unravels other things. Then we like, oh, okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk all these uncommunicated expectations, you know. So I think she got shocked by a lot of what marriage brings that people don't realize. And I think in God's grace, my sense of being calm kind of helped us, you know. Because if I was also high strung and I panicked, I think it would be far worse than what that initial shock was, you know. So the pot could have literally brought ruin. Yeah.
That's scary, man. People are fighting crazy things. You're like, you're fighting about what?
Yeah. I mean, there's another one. Our biggest fight was the first week after honeymoon. We fought over Colossians chapter 1, and she stormed out, got in the car, and left.
Colossians chapter number 1.
Yeah. Verses 15, everything is created by him for him. So we start there. Everything is created by him for him. Principalities, powers, etc. And so my wife is like, that's everything. So that includes bad powers, evil powers, everything. Yeah. So we're wrestling through this thing. She's like, nah, I'm done. Gets in the car and leaves.
What?
And imagine this. It's what you were saying earlier on. 2 ministries.
And now you gotta preach it.
Yeah. And that's part of the thing where it's you read all of these books about how discipleship in the home is gonna look like, and you get into the home and it's like, I'm actually not dealing with AI here. This is a real human with desires, with thoughts, with her own wrestling. God is shaping her in a specific way, and he's called me to be with him as he shapes her, you know. So I'm a tool in God's hands. Yeah. But I also have great, yeah. There's also things that I'm wrestling with, you know. So then I come in, head of the household. I'm going to be the leader of, the spiritual climate and the culture of our family, which I should be. Whew. That thing rocked us, man. Rocked us. Yeah.
Was there any particular area that it was causing you guys such a...
Yeah. So off camera we spoke about just, at that point in our lives we're kind of transitioning, from the church that we were in.
Yeah.
I tried to meet with the pastors there, constantly. Let's read the Bible. Let's, but again, you have to meet with the secretary's PA before you get to the pastor, and I was like, I'm trying to understand what this Christian community thing is. If we're community, why does it feel like this is we have a corporate culture more than a family culture, oriented. So I'm like, I don't know what this thing is, man. And I'm wrestling with things in the Bible, So I'm in there. I'm wrestling with, we were chatting earlier on the humanity of Christ. I'm wrestling with, which gifts still exist today, which gifts have ceased. I'm battling with a lot of things, and I'm just like, I'm here. I want to be discipled. I want to be led. I'm not trying to leave the church and do weird stuff.
I need to understand this.
Teach me. Yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why God has called you. I need to be poured into. And these dudes are just giving me
the runarounds,
and then I'm sitting there reading the stuff, listening to other dudes on the internet, get to church, and I'm like, yeah, but that does not fit. Listening to guys, getting books, reading stuff. We dating at that point.
Yeah.
With my wife, who was my girlfriend at that point. So now our dates, we start off nice. We sitting, hey, how's your week? Blah, blah, blah. And then we're Christians, so obviously we're gonna speak about the Bible.
The word.
Woo! Date that started off nice. Now, you might not be saved. You might not be a Christian. If we're gonna get married, So we had each other's throats. Because now,
doctrine.
Yeah, about doctrine.
You were not from the same church.
We were. But so we grew up in two different churches.
Yeah.
And then in my own journey of trying to get discipled, I moved to the church she was at, because it was closer to the university we went to.
Yeah.
So now we at that church. And then similar experience from the church I was at. These guys don't want to engage me. I come to this church, they don't want to engage me. But when it's time to put somebody on stage to sing, to rap,
or you the one,
now we're available, right? but when I'm like, guys, I just need to just teach me.
The whole center of our relationship, fellowship, and what?
Yes, nothing, right? So email after email, WhatsApp after WhatsApp, nothing. So now we're in the same church, and now we're sitting together in the service, and dude is preaching, and she can see I'm visibly uncomfortable, because I'm just like, this is not it, man. This can't be it. And then I can see her. She's like, but we spoke about this. Is this what you mean? I'm like, yeah. But then once you change what you believe, what does it mean for how you've set up your life? Because then it's like for her, okay, so that thing I believed about where God is taking us is not true. Maybe I didn't hear God right, because now what determines that I'm hearing God or not?
Oh my. Yeah. So now the foundation is shaky.
Proper shaky. So we wrestling through as we dating, preparing for marriage. And so I always describe our dating period as it was our engagement, because I didn't ask her to be my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like we went from friends, and I was like, you're my wife.
Marriage.
Yeah.
We're going marriage.
Yeah. I was like, you're my wife, right? And so for that year and some change, we were technically engaged. And so now we like, if we're gonna get into marriage, at least we need to be on the same page about fundamentals.
Yes.
So that was what was hard. And now fast forward to first week, we still wrestling over Colossians, right? Who Jesus is. Yeah. Oh Lord. Yeah, it was real.
I think also there's a dynamic to relationships.
Yeah.
In scripture, that conviction sometimes can strain a relationship dead, even though the person does not have a scripture for it.
Sure.
You know, I've seen people debate a position that they cannot back.
Yeah.
With their life.
Yeah.
Because it's something that was taught for so long.
Yes.
Bent on something that's not even there. Like
biblical,
completely.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where
you
would. So now, this is what I would ask then. From that analogy of the things that you guys were battling with doctrinally.
Yeah.
Your point of reference, basically, for scriptures around what you are debating was just not well versed. Is that what you think?
Yeah. So I think the big thing was, you know, the centrality of the gospel. That was the big thing, because then you go to church every Sunday and you kind of hear about everything else. You know, you hear about, you know, how God is going to bless you, how you're going to be successful, etc., etc. And I think maybe because you know, speaking of gifts we have, I think my gift is evangelism.
Yes.
You know, so from the time I gave my life to the Lord, I didn't even know the word evangelism. All I knew is that I need to go tell people about Jesus, you know. So by God's grace, I would stand outside shebeens, taverns, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you know, from 9 o'clock till like 3 a.m. Like, somebody's gonna walk out of here, they don't have anyone walking with them home, we might get killed together, but I'll tell you about Jesus on the way, right? So I knew that's what I've been called to do, and so now that's like rocking me, because when I'm sitting at church, I'm like, I don't hear anything about the cross, I don't hear anything about you know, who Jesus is. If Jesus is, you know, the one who's supposed to, you know, be the center of this whole book, surely he's everywhere in this book, you know. So I'm like, but I don't hear anything about him.
Yeah.
And so that's when the issue started, you know, because then it's like, if you're saved, you know, then we need to move on to other things. And I'm like, what? Like, how do we move on from Jesus? You know, everything else has to be interpreted in light of who he is, right? So I'm like, how do we move on? So the issue started there, because then it's like, we can talk about tongues, that's fine, but I need to understand what the Bible has to say about tongues in light of who Jesus is and what he's come to do in the world. If he's come to save us, surely whether you have the gift of tongues or not rests on what we believe about him first.
About him.
Yeah, you know? And so that's where the biggest issues were. So what is the gospel? You know, why did Jesus come? What's his purpose? What's the cross? You know, what does he
What's
he
the purpose
achieve?
of the death?
Yeah. Why does he even have to die? Why can't he just snap his fingers and save us from heaven?
Forgive you.
Yeah, exactly. You know. So now it's like, when you have to unpack that alone, then that rocks, because you said you're a Christian, and if you're a Christian, it has to be on this. You only in because you accepted his finished work on the cross. You only in because he died for you. You only in because he rose, right? Yeah. So now if he didn't, which is Paul's argument in 1 Corinthians 15, if he didn't rise,
we the worst.
Yeah, we wasting our time. Right? So now we have to kind of wrap our heads around that, you know, and then obviously the offshoots then are the gifts. So if we got this thing wrong, then did we get our understanding of the gifts wrong? If we got this thing wrong, did we get our understanding of what the purpose of the church? Starts from what our understanding of the gospel is. So that's where the
also that's sorry to cut you.
No, that's fine.
There is that leads to proper identity.
Yes.
If you hang on him, and if you are about who is he, why did he come, that gives you identity. It's that otherwise you'll start to identify yourself by all these other things. You start to identify yourself as a person who speaks tongues. You start you identify yourself by a gift. Outside. You know, if I come and say, I don't think you have the gift.
Yes.
You are wrong, because you just identified yourself as the gift.
Yes.
And so it's sometimes there's that thing of saying, hey, but you are just obsessed with that. But they don't understand what does what does it do for you to identify Christ in all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the biggest, and that's why I think both our foundations and our walls were collapsing, because it is such a fundamentally identity question, you know. So that's the thing that rocked us, man, because we had identified ourselves with everything else, you know. So you have dreams, so maybe you the dreamer, right? Because then if that's taken away, then who am I? Right? Who am I in this whole thing called the church, in this whole thing called the Christian faith, this whole thing called, you know, the kingdom of God? Who am I? And that's the, I guess maybe even the leading of the Holy Spirit in my heart to say, you a follower first, you know.
Before anything,
we're not going to see him and he's going to say, well done, my good and faithful prophet. Well done, my good and faithful dream interpreter. Well done, my good and faithful evangelist. But he's going to say servant. Right, and that's an identity thing. That's a core issue. So if I'm saved to be a servant, my service will express itself in whatever gift I have. But am I a servant in the first place? Has he called me to be? Am I saved? Right. So we're wrestling with that, man.
A lot of the identity issues that we are now having, people with all this sangomas and whatnot and stuff like that. It comes from that. There's this priority because you want to be special, and so the gift make us feel special. That's why in Matthew 7 they come through, and what's their brag? I was prophesying, I was doing everything that you know,
cast out demons.
I had the gift, I was functioning in it, and it's like, nah, you never believed it. When did you guys find in your marriage now? When did you guys now find, like, okay, we come now, this is us, this is what we are doing in this marriage? When did you guys feel like it?
So I think it was the year before we got married. So I had moved to the current church that I'm in, and part of the motivation to move was you know, I wanted to marry her. And so I was like, I need to find a Bible teaching church for us to be in together. And I remember when I got there, you know, solid teaching, like solid community as well. You know, people just loved you as you walk in. They don't know who you are. There's no pretense. You don't need to know some special family in the church. You just stay human, right? You're an image bearer. We're here. We love you, right? Felt that. And so I think it was Easter Sunday. I'd invited her to come to church. It's the first time she says she heard the gospel. You know, and it felt like this is the first time she's given her life to the Lord. And then we got married, still were having, you know, some debates here and there, and obviously then the Colossian thing happens. But we knew we were on the same page. But even 10 years in, there's still things that we're wrestling with. But I think the wrestle now is not necessarily even doctrinal, but it's just how God is working with us together, but also individually. That's where the thing is now, where it's like, okay, I can't put my wife in a box. You know, I can't now have my own conviction and then throw that on God to say, God, this is how you work with everyone, with all your children, right? I'm like, it can't, even though me and her are one in many ways, but God is still working in her life in ways that are different from how he's working in my life. But yet the foundation of all of that, the final authority, is the scriptures. It's not how she feels or how I feel, you know, but we submit.
Your feelings are going to change tomorrow.
Totally, you know. I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and they're like, just even biologically, the person I married 10 years ago is not the same, right? They physically changed. And so feelings definitely will change, and we can't base what God is doing in our lives on how we feel, right? But that's I think the wrestle, and now there's a freedom that I think God is blessing us with, and just saying, hey, like, you know, there's ways in which I tend to be very hard and conservative. There's ways in which she's like very soft, liberal, you know, and I use those terms very cautiously
because it means a lot to
I know, so very cautiously, the English definition of those words, without any political or theological attachments to them, right? But it's in those very, very broad categories that we've both recognized that we wouldn't have been together if I wasn't liberal in certain things, you know. So we're both artists, So we tend to be different and less conservative in that part of who we are. And that's the thing that brings us together. You know, she's very hard on certain things. Like she was saying yesterday, there's this podcaster that she's been listening to. Some stuff came out about him that, you know, he might not be... he's lied about his qualifications that helped him to start the podcast, you know. And so she was like, yeah, I'm not listening to that guy. And I was like, oh, that's such a conservative hard line for you to draw, you know. And then I'm like, well, that's why I'm attracted to you, because there's things about you that are very hard, and then there's things about me that are soft and liberal that she's attracted to. And so we're finding ways to just exist in that freedom that, hey, listen, just because I see certain things a certain way, I shouldn't expect and assume that God is going to work in your life that way,
the same way.
But I need, and that's what marriage is, I need to work hard to say, Lord, how do I die to myself? How do I die to my way of believing that this is the only way you can work, and actually be free to how you working in her life, and seeing what you're doing in my wife's heart, my wife's life, and actually say, yo, how do I pray into that? How do I, you know, pour more of who I am into that? And so I think we're finding our freedom in that. But I could tell you now, man, that Colossians 1 storming out, that thing scarred me. It scarred me. And it took us probably 7 years to talk about that. That thing rocked my life. It scarred me. We to actually sit down and say, this is how that thing made me feel. This is how it made me insecure to lead in the house. You know, this is how it made me insecure in again living in the freedom of seeing what God is doing in your life. It took us 7 years to sit down and have that conversation, you know. And so for the first 7 years of my life as the spiritual leader of our house, I was limping the whole time. I'm not walking straight. You know, I came in walking very straight.
You were very confident.
We're gonna do this thing. Humbled. I was limping.
Colossians. Colossians is Kanye, my boy.
Yeah. Paul says in Colossians 3, take off, man. Take off the old and put on the new. And I needed to take off the old. You know, and put on the new. And so that's been a journey and a process, man. Yeah.
You know, and also a lot of our generation nowadays, it's like, if one thing is said here, that's it. This defines you.
Sure.
You know, and so 2-3 weeks from now, someone comes up and is like, "Hey, you call me." Wait, are we still back there?
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
And which is where grace comes back in. You know, which is why I say this not to insult, but I say this to just so that people can understand, especially people who are unbelievers. I don't believe. I don't have a lot of faith in unbelievers' marriages.
Sure.
Yes, there are marriages that are of unbelievers that last.
Yeah.
But I just don't have much faith in that, because what's your reference point? You know? As a believer, I have Christ as a reference point. You know, it literally uses Christ to give an example of marriage. It says, you know, husbands, love your wife as Christ.
That's the church.
I would be very careful advising someone. When the Bible says, what God has put together, let no man.
Yeah.
Do you want to be the no man? I don't know, man. Now, as a pastor.
Sure, man.
Outside of the thing that you mentioned earlier on, what is the other thing that you think another person who's going towards marriage should be thinking about?
I mean, there's probably a lot, but two big things that kill marriage is sex and money. You know, so
talk about those.
So I'm like, listen, I think you need to have at least like fairly good, you know, because to say have a good understanding is putting pressure on people, because even for us who are married, we're still learning, you know. But I think those are two big things that if you don't subdue, they definitely gonna rock you. And by that I mean, one, at an individual level, you guys need to have an understanding of what sex and money is going to look like or are going to look like in your marriage, but then collectively, what are you agreeing on? Because you might have, separate convictions when it comes to those things. So let's take sex, for example, men tend to want sex more than women, and we've heard the advice over and over, and being married, I could tell you, by the time you have sex with your wife in the evening, you started working her, the day before. Because for her, she can only come have sex with you if her emotions are taken care of. And so you can't just sit there at night and be like, I'm ready now. And she's like, listen, right? Like you should have started this thing in the morning. And by that is, you kind of priming her, speaking to her, giving her, working her heart. So a friend of mine would say, massage her heart, right? And so we come into marriage with as guys. One, we could probably even have a whole podcast about just the abuse of not even abuse, but the use of pornography, and how that like reshapes who we are, you know. And then we come into marriage with that, I think another friend of mine said, like there's no wife that will ever win against a porn star.
It's not gonna happen.
Right? If you come into your marriage with that,
you have to stop. You have to stop watching the stuff. Start there. That's the first thing.
That thing is it's like cocaine, man. It's gonna rewire your brain, and it's gonna build unrealistic appetites and expectations, so then when you come in, one, you're gonna expect your wife to be an actress, right? And she's not that. She's a real human with a real heart, with real struggles. She's probably
entertaining.
She's exactly right. She wants to love you. She wants to build a family. Wants to build a marriage with you. So you're gonna either expect that, or secondly, if you're not wanting her to just dance, you're gonna have a very low self-esteem, because that thing has taught you that you don't match up to those guys. You probably going to be insecure about your performance, and etc. In fact on our podcast we had a guy who's a health specialist, married guy, and we had a whole episode about just talking about the effects of porn before you get married and while you're married, right? So I think as men we need to make sure we kill that thing, So what we were saying earlier on, when you were like, when the Bible says flee, there's no you can't spiritualize fleeing. Run away. Kill that thing. Don't even touch it, right? And so I think if you're about to get married, you've gone down that rabbit hole, unfortunately. Have those conversations. Be honest. It's gonna be hard. It's probably gonna be the hardest conversation you're gonna
have. The last thing you want to be deleting, hiding, and having folders and extra. Just
come clean with that thing. Whether it is a problem, like you're addicted to it, or you're a casual visitor. Come clean with whoever you're gonna get married to. And the assumption again is that men deal with that only. There's a large number of women, especially Christian, right? So
and they hide it very well.
So there's a lot of that where I'm like, before you get married, talk about that. Talk about how you've engaged with that stuff. Methods of how you're going to keep each other accountable so that doesn't creep into your marriage. Satan wants to keep you out of the marriage bed before you get married. Once you're married, he wants to get you out of the marriage bed. So before you get married, rather, he wants to get you in the married bed. So he wants to lead you there. But once you're married, he wants to get you out, and porn is one of the things he's going to use. But speak about it, man. Be honest. And then husbands, know that, man. You need to work your wife's heart. If she touches you in the middle of the night, you're ready.
It
but
doesn't
for her,
take much.
Work her heart, man. Work her heart, massage her heart, massage your brain, care for her, so that when she's cared for, then she can open up in other ways. Right? Then finances, I think, man, that's massive. Be open and honest. Again, here's my salary. Here's how much I earn. Here's what I think about money, and keep an open and honest line of communication between the two of you when it comes to money. And I think the biggest killer around money is in-laws, So we come from different families. Maybe I have... You're the first one to go to varsity, and so the whole village is looking at you to come back and provide. And now you've gotten this girl from the city, you're marrying her. Tell her, there's 500 other people who want me to take care of them. How are we going to do it together? You know, so then we can say, listen, we only earn 500 between the two of us. We can't take care of 500 other people. Maybe we're just going to set out $50 aside to give the whole village 50 rand. And together we go explain to the village,
we can't do that.
Yes, this is how much we can afford. You know, another thing I always say to gents, when your family wants money, ask them to speak to your wife.
Oh, yeah.
That builds, you know, because then they're not just coming to us for airtime. They're not just coming to ask, hey, Abuti, hey, Abuti, kupa di sneaker. They'll come when it's like, yes, we're starving, man. We don't have money for electricity. We don't, you know, it's really important things. But it also reinforces to them that you are one with this person now. And secondly, you're not going to make decisions alone, and they should respect your marriage. It's what you were saying. They should not be the man that comes in between, you know, the two.
Do they really want to be there?
Yeah, you know. So
before you continue that,
yeah,
there was a long distance thingy that I had died because I could see she was completely closed. You know, so I'd ask, who are you? Who are you?
Sure,
you know?
Sure.
I'm not the police here. I'm not investigating to get you arrested or anything. No. But I brought this particular subject, I think, like several times, and then I could see that.
Yeah.
Usistas does not understand
how
her past influences her present decisions.
Yeah.
You know, so she's like, but why are you so concerned? I'm like, hey, there are things right now that you are doing, that you are reflecting, that tell me you have a past.
Yes, exactly.
And she really did not get that. I think maybe a year went by, a year and a half. And when the Bible, the things that we had verses on came up, she was like, nah.
Sure.
But that was because she had built this wall, like an entire wall. Like, there's some churches that are doing people, you know, that's what this conversation is bringing my point to.
Sure.
They're doing such a disservice of how they speak about our walk.
Yeah, man.
To a point where the sanctification aspect is not there.
Sure.
Like, there is a viewpoint that actually looks so dangerous, that the marriage nowadays has no sanctification. Now, by sanctification is that aspect of the person you are with still has their journey, like you were saying earlier on.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And so we don't see that.
Yeah.
We're expecting these sparkling angels. This person will turn around and you have to say, get thee behind me. Don't finish with the Satan. Don't go there. We can't cancel that.
We'll be divorced. And I remember having to remind my wife, like, I might say something to you, might come across very harsh, or vice versa. You say something to me that comes across very harsh, inconsiderate. But I'm like, at the back of that, just remember I'm your friend. Yeah. So maybe say to yourself, okay, my friend is probably upset about something, but they don't mean I'm disgusting. You're not saying I'm rotten. You know, like, he just didn't have the right words. Yeah. But he's my friend, right? Yeah. And so I think friendship has kind of helped us in mitigating some of those things, where we can speak to each other, but then know that, okay, there's an aspect of friendship, because then that opens up, you know. So it's going back to your example of the lady that you were with. My wife opens up, one, because we know it's important for our marriage, but you're my friend, man. You need to know everything. Yeah. If I don't tell you, who am I going to tell? You know. So I think friendship has really helped us, man. But I would say to people, don't let that be a deterrent. If you're not friends with somebody before you get married, don't be like,
it can be built on.
It can, definitely. Yeah. I've seen people who started off as friends, got married, and that friendship ended.
Yeah.
So
there was nothing else that established.
Yes. So the friendship was enough for them to say, let's start this thing. But they didn't realize that marriage calls both of us to work. Right? So yes, we're getting sanctified individually, but God designed marriage to sanctify us together. And part of that sanctification comes in saying, you're not going to sleep here. You have to actually put in work for this thing to work. Yeah. Another example I think that demonstrates that is, when you're dating or you're engaged, a lot of your feelings kind of take the front seat. Things are still nice. So if somebody shouts at you, you forgive them because you feel good, and so there's not even like an intentional cognitive approach to forgiving. It's just I'm feeling, so I'll just forgive you that way, But when you're married, like your feelings are bouncing everywhere, and you need to learn how to control them. So when we speak about self-control, I know a lot of us tend to think sexually only. But self-control means feelings as well. Control those things, So when you're married, a friend of mine would always say, don't put them in the front seat, but put them in the back seat. At the same time, do not put them in the boot where you're going to ignore your feelings, because they'll build up and the boot will start smelling and it will contaminate your whole marriage. But put them in the back seat where they're supposed to be, where you can see your feelings and you can acknowledge them, So he says feelings are like taking kids on a road trip. You don't put kids in the front seat. They'll kill you on the road trip. You're driving on the N12 and your kid is there. They're going to destroy you, right? But you don't put the kid in the back seat, in the boot.
You put them
in the back seat. Just leave them in the back seat. They'll make noise sometimes, and then you'll be, that's when you're upset. But sometimes on the road trip, the kids are quiet, they're sleeping, you're happy, So learn how to control your feelings, man. When you're married.
That's a lot to take it, and unfortunately, we just have too many bad voices.
Yeah,
we have too many bad voices, and the analogy of feelings also. A lot of people, if they just kept quiet, they would have preserved a lot. I'm telling you, people underestimate how this. You feel like this right now, and I say that all the time. Yeah. You feel like this right now. Trust me, you're going to feel different in the next 5 minutes.
100.
If you have an issue at your family thingy, it doesn't spill there.
Yes.
It's gonna spill here
100.
Because this is the one relationship that's based on your feelings.
Yes.
This is the relationship. This is the relationship that actually cares about how you feel.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that when you have issues elsewhere, it spills here.
Yep.
It feels like, let's balance that.
Yes.
Let's make sure that that's sorted and we put it in its place.
It's good, man.
I remember I saw this video example of a pastor who brought a family.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, you, the wife, the husband, and your kids, come, stand on the stage. And he wanted to give an illustration. Sure. And they naturally stood wife, husband, kids. He says that's a very big mistake.
Sure.
So, and he says, you see this thing, what they just did right here?
Yeah.
This is the problem with us, is that we have kids in the center of our thing.
Yep.
There's the two of you first, and then the kids.
Yep.
That's why I don't like polygamists.
Yes.
And their whole thing, because it's an excuse for you to always be right.
Sure.
If this wife is angry with you, you're going to jump over to go to this one, so that she must agree with you at all costs.
Yeah. Marriage will bring your selfishness out, man. Marriage will bring your self-centeredness out. It will bring your brokenness out and bring it to your face.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of marriage. I always say that, when God grants you the gift of marriage, in His wisdom, He's like, I will sanctify you. And I think marriage is the best way to sanctify you, and He doesn't have that for everybody. Other people, he will, in His wisdom again and providence, will say that singleness is the best way He will sanctify them. Yeah. But marriage will cause you to pause, So I always say, people will see me on the podcast, people will see me preaching, people will see me, performing too. But the person who can see through all of that, it's my wife. My wife can see through all of that. I could put on a cape, I could put on, makeup, I could put on, and she's just like, I know your socks with holes, man. I know your underwear that you haven't washed.
Yeah.
I know that. All of that just humbles me so much, man, and says, like, if I'm not gonna be authentic here and be truthful, like I have no right getting on microphones and trying to say, hey, let's live this way when at home,
it's not there.
It's not there. And marriage will force that thing out, and it causes us to again say, like you were saying, what am I doing in this marriage? What am I doing to cause my wife to act a certain way? And sure, there's times where people just act out on their own, but marriage forces you to say, what am I doing here? So Ephesians 5 again, husbands, love your wife like Christ loves the church. Out of those 10 verses, women are told to do 2 things. So out of 10 verses, only 2 are for them: submit and respect. But the rest of the 8 verses,
that's you, Mike.
He's working out how you're supposed to love your wife. So now I can spend all my married life saying, well, you need to submit, you need to respect me. And God is like, I gave you 8 verses. Focus on what you have to do.
On the 8 verses.
I'll deal with her, right? And she has to do her part. And I'm like, this whole marriages where people cross lanes, and the wife is trying to force the husband to love me. This is, the Bible commands you to love me like that. I'm like, listen, that's not going to work out, man. And for husbands who are constantly reminding their wives, you need to I'm like, it's love. That's what she'll submit to, right? And again, it doesn't mean that if you're struggling to love her, she shouldn't submit to you at all. But the point is, just focus on what God has called you to do. Love your wife, man. And if we're going to be married, we in our 30s now. If we're going to be married like for the rest of our lives, and God grants us life and we die maybe in our 80s, I have 50 plus years to figure out how to love my wife, and I have 50 years to be creative. I have 50 plus years to explore. I have 50 plus years to find new ways of how to love her, instead of trying to spend all my time to say, you need to submit, She has 50 plus years to find ways of how she can submit, So maybe we get married and we are fighting based on theology, and she's 10 years later found a way to submit to that part of our marriage and my leadership. Well, she has another 10 years to submit if she's struggling in submitting in finances, if she's struggling to submit in, where I'm trying to carry our family to, whatever. But she has
the whole 9.
Yeah, and that's what marriage is. But we can't now try and say, do this and do it, and especially if I'm telling you to do something, best believe it's tainted by my own biases, my own preferences, my own selfish ambitions, and it's, I need to keep pushing my wife to Jesus. She needs to push me to Jesus, and just say, if you're going to love me as Christ loves the church, how's your relationship with Jesus? How's your prayer life? And I need to, if I see my wife is not submitting, I can't be, submit. No, I need to, how's your relationship with Jesus? How's your walk? Because the minute you stop submitting, it's because you stop submitting to the King. The minute I stop loving you, it's because exactly, I've stopped loving Jesus. That's why I'll stop loving my wife. I always say to guys, you don't wake up cheating on your wife. You started cheating on Jesus. That's that you lost sight of him. Hence now you're losing sight of your wife. Right? You lost sight of Jesus. Hence you're losing sight of your husband. So I can't now try and deal with the symptom. Like there's a core issue. The core issue is I've left the King, man. Hence now I can't even love his daughter.
The fact that you're still questioning, like that point that you mentioned, the fact that you're still questioning what I'm doing, question whether you do your part and stuff. And also, if there's any reference, direct me to Jesus.
Come on now,
That's a lot to be said.
But
totally, anyways, man, thanks for coming through.
No, I appreciate it, man.
Highly appreciative of that. So, guys, y'all remember, check out the husband podcast. Husband to be. Y'all be over there. And so, y'all be over there. And on this particular episode, as I've stated, everybody's speaking their story. Start advising other people where they are and stuff, like you can get yourself in problems, because allow God to move people. It's like where the well done thou good and faithful servant comes in, by the way. We have verses like that, but we don't understand where they come in. When God looks at how we navigated through life with everything that we had to deal with, how did you navigate?
Sure.
Where were your talents? You were complaining about love. You are busy looking at the kind of guy that you want on TV. You've never met that type of a person. The people that are asking you out now, they are not those people. But you are busy obsessing about someone who's on, and you want that guy in your personal life to fit a guy on TV who might be living a fake life. Be careful, they advise you here. Because it crafts a certain mindset around you, and then you might end up living, hey, you know what? To each and every man his own. We have a very short time to be here. And so, if you waste most of that time, answer it yourself. It's okay, we're done here.